Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, we finish our look at the disappearance of Judy Martins. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my deadly co-host, Alice.
Oh, I'm anything but. I don't think anyone in life has met me in real life and was like, that's a deadly girl.
Well, I'm told by Kieran that amongst the Ghana people of Australia, deadly is like the ultimate compliment.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome then, because in the American sense, I'm not deadly. I'm tiny,
Yeah.
like not actually tiny, but like short and not imposing.
Whatever.
So thank
You're
you.
deadly.
I'll be deadly. And
Always.
also, I want to go there.
Let's go.
Let's go.
We've been saying, and we really need to do this tour thing. We need to figure out a tour.
I just want to go to the places I'd like to visit. Like
I know, exactly, because then we can, write it off on our taxes or something.
It's not
That'd be
about
awesome.
that. It's just if we're gonna do something fun, might as well go to all the places we want to visit.
I mean, I like writing it off on our taxes, too. I don't know why that's not part of the attractiveness. By the way, I was listening to, I was driving. I had to drive back from Prosecutors Day, and I was listening to our first episode.
Aw.
And I listened to our Elisa Lamb stuff. It's very endearing. We were very charming.
so
It was a
young.
charming episode. We were so
We were
young.
so
we were just
young. We were very young. It was 4 years ago. That's a long time
Yeah.
ago.
It's funny to listen to it. I mean, at some points it sounds exactly like what we do now, because
Yeah.
the formula has not changed, right? I mean, we do
Yeah.
we have the outline and do everything, but at other times it was just very different. I don't know. It was interesting to listen to. So those are out there.
I
if anybody
can't
wants to
bring
listen
myself
to
to go listen to it. Just I don't know. I don't love looking at pictures of myself, for example. But
And I know we got to get to this case, but I have another question for you.
oh,
I've decided I'm not going to worry so much about the critics who don't like us to talk at the beginning. But here's an interesting. I'm just curious what your thought is on this. So
Okay.
tonight there was a baseball game that it was perfect through the 7th inning. Perfect game. There's only been 20 of them in the history of
Okay.
baseball. And the perfect inning was broken up by a bunt single. Is that fair play, or should that bunter be criticized for bunting to break up the perfect game? What do you think?
as someone who's not a sports expert, if I'm watching the game, I'd be upset. I'm like, come on, we're going for something bigger here, man. It's not about it's not about that. You're not gonna bunt a single. That's how I would feel.
I thought it was pretty weak. I thought it was pretty weak sauce. Now, I'll say this, and I'm not sure what the answer to this is. If I was at home and the person pitching the perfect game was the away team, I can see, like, you're not going to pitch a perfect game in our stadium. So look, I'm going to bunt it, and if you can't stop the bunt,
there's nothing illegal about that. But in terms of, like, we're all here for something bigger. We're seeing, like, history being made. Don't mess that up.
And the unique thing about baseball is, unlike any other sport, the opposing team in so many ways controls stuff like that. Like, I'll give you an example. Shohei Ohtani. He went 6 for 6, 10 RBIs, 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases, like an insane game. And they talked to the Seattle Mariners, who they were playing against, afterwards, and noted that on his last at bat, where he hit a home run, he was 5 for 5. He comes up, they didn't just walk him. You can intentionally walk him. You don't even have to pitch to the guy, right? And they asked the Seattle manager about that. And he was like, there was no way we were going to do that. This guy was having a great game. We were going to pitch to him. And if we couldn't stop him and he hit home runs, so be it. And I appreciated that so much. Like, I appreciate that approach much more than bunting to try and get a base. Anyways, totally unrelated.
No, that's a fair question, right? Because I think it says a lot about, like, how you view bigger questions in life, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're up by, like, 40 points or whatever at the end of a football game.
Right.
You don't run.
Do you throw the ball?
No.
Or do you just take a knee?
You take a knee.
Yeah.
It's just the right thing to do.
Exactly. No, it's the same way. Yep. I'm with you.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're aligned there, because you want people to, be able to break out of prison. So our friendship can be saved because we agree on the ethics of baseball and football.
I do want to say, before we get started, happy birthday to Jill.
Ooh, happy birthday,
Happy
Jill.
birthday. And I do want to make a couple corrections. The problem with doing this podcast and being like 2 months ahead is our corrections are always very late. So, but better late than never, right? So 2 things. On the Stainer brothers, we're very hard on the judge in that case for giving 20 months to the kidnapper. Turns out it was even worse than that. There was a law in California.
It was not the judge's fault.
Worst possible law I can imagine, which tied the judge's hands. So, sorry, Judge, but wow. Whenever a legislator proposed that, all my wrath goes to you, because that's a stupid law. Now, fortunately, they have repealed that law. So now you can give more than 20 months to someone who kidnaps a kid and keeps them in prison for 7 years. And the reason you can only give him 20 months is because he kidnapped somebody else. I mean, just imagine this for a second. The fact that he did it twice meant that the second time he could only get 20 months, because we wouldn't want to give him too much time for his crimes, right? Anyways, so that's ridiculous. And the second thing, which my wife was very upset about, the LeBaron is not a Chevrolet. It's a Chrysler.
Right. So, no, sorry. I saw her angry text messages as we were saying it.
Yes. I blame myself. So those are our corrections. They don't have anything to do with Judy Martins, but we're getting back into Judy Martins tonight just to remind you about this case. And one thing I want to reiterate that we talked about last time, but I think is so important, and as we're going through the timeline, sometimes we sort of mention something, but then we just keep going because we're trying to get through the rest of the case. Judy Martins, I want you to remember Maura Murray. How could you forget Maura Murray, right? In case we did, and we talked about how Maura Murray disappeared in as little as 7 minutes. She has her car parked on the side of the road. A bus driver sees her. Someone looking out their window sees her. 7 minutes pass, maybe a little bit more, but as little as 7 minutes pass, and she's gone. And just how remarkable that was, that she disappeared in that circumstance. This case, if you think about this, is even wilder. Judy disappeared walking 100 yards from one dorm to another, a walk that would take less than 5 minutes. That is the mystery that we are facing right now. Unless you think she made it back to her apartment and something happened the next day, and we're going to talk about why that's not the case when we get to theories. But unless you think that, she had to disappear in one of the shortest periods you could possibly imagine.
Absolutely. So let's dive back into the timeline. As you may remember, it was right after midnight, kind of in the early morning hours of May 24th, 1978, that 5-minute walk happened. So we made it through to May 31st, 1978. So just about a week later. At 5:30 that evening, a man named Andrew Fabini reported seeing a woman matching Judy's description in Ravenna, Ohio, walking down Prospect Street towards a Sunoco station. He said the woman appeared spaced out. Like we said at the end of last week's episode, basically every sighting after May 24th early morning are probably just Good Samaritans trying to help out, but there's no real basis to believe that these sightings are Judy. So it's not clear if it's Judy. These people don't know Judy, so it's not like someone who's in her class who says, no, I saw Judy. She was at the checkout counter. These are people who have seen news reports and think they see, generally it's going to be a woman, not even necessarily a woman who matches Judy's description, but who seems spaced out or distressed or something like that. And that's what causes them to report it, because they're seeing someone who's distressed, who may just be a random person having a tough day.
And I think it's important. We talked about this before, but this is such a good case for this phenomenon. And I can think all the way back. Well, I mean, we talked about Maura Murray, but Matrice Richardson. Remember her? She disappeared from a police station. She was found not close to the police station, a pretty strange place, a very isolated mountain pass, basically, like Shadow Valley or something, some bizarre name, but a very, very strange story, one that stuck with us, I think, for a long time. But one of the things you may have forgotten is how many sightings there were of her in Las Vegas, to the point that her father actually went to Las Vegas with some friends to look for her, because so many people said they saw a woman matching her description, including her friends. So not just people that didn't know her, saw people that they thought were Matrice in Las Vegas. She obviously wasn't in Las Vegas. She was dead by then. But that was the first case where you saw that. But I dare say in every missing persons case, there are reports of someone matching that description seen somewhere else. And it's kind of like, we always say when somebody disappears, the police shouldn't jump to conclusions and just assume, well, they'll be back. And in the same way, when you hear about these sightings, you have to chase them down. You have to run them down. But 99 times out of 100, they are false sightings, because just think about what this means. It means somebody saw this lady, noticed her because she was spaced out. And so that made a little bit of an impression upon them. Then days later, a week later, they see a flyer or they see a news report and they see a woman and they think to themselves, she kind of looks like that lady I saw who was spaced out. And they're good citizens, so they call it in. The chances that she's in Ravenna, Ohio, though, are pretty low. And, even in this case, you're seeing conflicting reports. You're seeing reports, and I don't know if we've gotten to this one. I'm not even sure if this one's in our timeline or not, but you're going to get a report later of somebody who was headed to Mexico, ran into somebody who told him, I'm hitchhiking down to Mexico. And, they start looking for her. Well, the lady in Ravenna and the lady in the bar that we mentioned last week and the lady hitchhiking to Mexico are probably not all the same people. At least two of those are mistaken. And they actually found the lady who said in Mexico, and it wasn't her. So just remember that whenever you see these stories and you see them in the news. I remember Gabby Petito, just all the false sightings of her basically all over the place, right? And you're going to see that. And it's also important in cases like Scott Peterson. Because remember, what did you hear in Scott Peterson? All these random people saw a lady who may or may not have been pregnant, who was
maybe walking a dog.
Yeah, who was wearing the wrong clothes, but happened to be the clothes that Scott described her being in. Well, we found out that wasn't true when we found her body. Think about that. Those people are just as unreliable as these folks. But if you are inclined to believe something, like if you're the family and you really want her to be alive, you'll grab onto this stuff and hope that it's true.
This goes back to one of those truths that we've said so many times before. That's partly why direct evidence doesn't necessarily mean it's better evidence. Direct evidence is eyewitness testimony. That's what direct evidence means. And we know that memories and eyewitness testimony is incredibly faulty, because our brains are these amazing creatures that I don't really understand that create connections that may not actually be there. Yesterday, I heard an attorney talk, like a legal commentator, say, and it like ripped my heart out. And all of you who listen to our show will understand why it ripped my heart out. She's a practicing attorney, and she was like commenting on a case, and she's like, Oh man, well, this is a purely circumstantial case, so they really got nothing. And I was like, there's so much circumstantial evidence, good circumstantial evidence, and circumstantial evidence is just as weighty as direct evidence in the court of law for purposes of evidentiary value. But everything Brett's talking about there with false sightings or mistaken sightings, those of you who are always saying, oh, it's just all circumstantial evidence. You want direct evidence? That's direct evidence. See how faulty it can also be?
Let me guess. She was a defense attorney.
She was.
She
really was.
Yeah,
Which is, that's not to laugh at defense attorneys, but that is a very classic argument in court for defense attorneys to make because jurors watch TV and in life, we understand the argument, oh, it's all circumstantial, right? Like, oh, and that's like an argument we make in daily life. So it's a nice argument to make to lay people who don't understand evidentiary value. So we're not laughing at defense attorneys that they don't know that's the case. It's that it's a very common tactic to use, even though the defense attorney knows evidentiarily it doesn't make a difference if it's direct versus circumstantial. Okay, with that, moving on to the next day. So we're a week in. There is no sign whatsoever of Judy. So on June 1st, 1978, the police, they kind of don't know what to do. So they decide to search Judy's room again. And they do so around noon that day. But they already searched it before. Nothing really new is discovered that provides any clues to her disappearance. It's basically the same as what they found before. It didn't appear that she'd been back. She left behind items that her family state she would have taken was she planning on leaving. At 3:00 that day, 2 detectives and a dozen other security guards kind of start expanding their search. No longer are they just sticking to her room or trying to wait for tips of sightings. It's looking bad for Judy, right? And so they complete a search of the wooded areas surrounding the university. And you do that not to find a runaway or someone starting a new life. You do that when you think you're going to find a body that's been dumped there.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
So at this point, as Alice said, the police are starting to think foul play. They haven't found her body, but as we all know, you don't necessarily need a body to start investigating a crime. You don't even necessarily need one to prosecute a crime if you have enough evidence that a crime has been committed. And they're really wanting to know, is the information that we're being given accurate? And where are you going to look? You're going to look to the people who've told you things in the beginning of this investigation, who've sort of set the stage for everything you're doing. And you're going to start questioning people, and you're going to start polygraphing people. And the polygraph, we talked about it before. How accurate is it? I don't know. But I'll tell you what it's pretty good at, convincing people to talk. Because a lot of times you give somebody a polygraph, you tell them they lied, and all of a sudden they start talking. Because, well, you got me, so let me talk. So anyways, so I start giving polygraphs to people. Charlie Nevels is given a polygraph. You may remember Charlie was somebody who Judy may or may not have been in sort of a burgeoning relationship with, may have just been friends with, but we know spent several hours with him the night that she disappeared. And in fact, he is the last person that we know of concretely who saw her alive. He's actually the one who sees her leave the dorm room. He is given a polygraph. He passes. Jim Young. Now, Jim's the ex-boyfriend with the questionable criminal history, the one who was on house arrest at the time, but nevertheless was somebody that no one really thought was a danger to Judy. And I think this is important. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I think it is important. Everyone in Judy's life and everyone in Jim's life seems to say, he's a great guy. You know, he's crazy, drinks too much, likes to shoot guns, but never had a problem with Judy, never violent, never controlling, none of the things that you might expect from the jealous ex-boyfriend who's going to do something. Doesn't necessarily mean he didn't do anything, but that is something that people have said. He is given a polygraph, and he also passes. So the police have to keep moving on. Now, there are several more tips that come into the police regarding possible sightings of Judy, but they're either proven false or the police are unable to confirm if this was Judy at all. And in fact, most of the time, it wasn't. Now, some of these sightings are similar to what we've heard before. This description of Judy is spaced out when seen. I mean, look, I don't know. It's the 1970s. Everybody's smoking pot and doing drugs or whatever. People are seeing these quote unquote spaced out people. They assume, well, maybe she's being taken advantage of or something like that. But none of these sightings ever really fit any of the details we know. They don't really fit Judy. Remember, there was the one sighting of a tall, spaced out girl. Well, she's not tall, so that doesn't really work. And so these sightings aren't leading anywhere for the police. So that's June 2nd. On June 5th, the police are administering more polygraph tests, this time to Bernie Caffrey. He was another person that saw her that night. And you can sort of understand what the police are doing here. You've got really 3 buckets of possible things that happened. 1, someone that she saw that night, for whatever reason, decided to take advantage of the fact that maybe she lives alone, campus is deserted, there's not a lot of witnesses, they attack her in some way. Second possibility is, as we said, she is grabbed in that 100-yard walk, that less than 5-minute walk by just happened to be either a serial killer or someone who at least committed this crime. It's a crime of opportunity. Pretty girl walking home alone at night, no witnesses, grab her, kill her. And then the third option, something sort of else happened. She safely leaves the area. Maybe she goes back to her dorm. Maybe she goes out for some drinks or goes to a party or heads out of town for some reason. Those are really your 3 options. And they're sort of looking at all those things. And the polygraphs are meant to eliminate the possibility of someone who saw her that night. So they're administering these polygraphs and everybody is passing. Now, on the same day, law enforcement conducts an aerial search of the wooded areas surrounding Kent State University. Nothing is located. What's interesting about this search, it was actually conducted by the Ohio National Guard. Kent State does not have a great relationship with the National Guard after what happened there. But here they're actually asking for their help. The National Guard is attempting to use sort of infrared as part of this search. As we're going to talk about later, there are a lot of very wooded, very dense areas. Sounds like, number 1, the technology wasn't quite as good as what we have now. And number 2, the way that they were using it wouldn't necessarily have found anything. So it's unclear how helpful this would be. But they're trying to make sure there's not a body in the woods or somehow she's wandered off into the woods and they're going to find her. But nevertheless, nothing is found. Years start to pass. The police continue to investigate leads into Judy's disappearance, but still nothing concrete is recovered.
And this is just so hard. I mean, they are searching everywhere. They're following up on leads, even if they seem unlikely to be related to Judy. And you can see how investigations can really reach a lot of dead ends. There's no cell phones at this time, so you can't, do a cell phone dump, try to track her phone. And nobody saw anything. This is really, really hard. So fast forward about 5 years. On August 8th, 1983, the Avon Lake PD receive an anonymous call that Judy Martins, who's now using the name Sandra, was recently released from the Cleveland House of Corrections. So the Avon PD reach out to the House of Corrections, who do confirm there was a woman named Sandra Lopez who matched Judy's general physical description, had just been released. And so they get a handwriting sample from the Sandra Lopez, who had just been released from the corrections house. And they did a handwriting analysis. And it did appear that Sandra Lopez's handwriting was remarkably close to Judy's. By the way, it's kind of strange. Like, instead of like comparing pictures or something, you're like, you know what we have? We have a note that, that Sandra wrote. Let me fax you that note and see if it matches. But that's what they had. And that's what they were going off of. We talked a lot about this in the John Benet Ramsey case about handwriting analysis. When you're looking for something, I'm not a handwriting analysis expert. I've never relied on it heavily for any one of my cases for evidentiary value. It is possible to see. I personally write in lots of different ways depending on my mood and my tiredness. And so if you're looking for similarities, I think you can find similarities, especially if you're talking about people about the same age. And I think like gender has to do with it too. Like a lot of us girls wrote in like curly ways that were cute, and maybe we had sororities that like made us have cute little ways of doing calligraphy. And if you were raised around the same time, like you wrote your A's the same way, for example, the way you wrote your P's and curled your G's or whatever. So it doesn't surprise me that they found similarities. But there's a reason we don't usually do identity matches based on handwriting. So they did a little bit more digging, and this is not a surprise, but it does not appear that Sandra Lopez was Judy Martins. This is after a judge ordered Sandra to submit her dental x-rays that she was ruled out because Sandra's dental x-rays showed that she still had her wisdom teeth, but Judy had her wisdom teeth removed. And on top of all this, maybe they should have just asked Sandra because Sandra was like, I'm not Judy Martins. So they did look into it. Sandra is not Judy, but police would discover that there's a reason the two were tied together. You see, Sandra had used Judy's birthday and even called herself Judy Martinez, which is a little interesting. Why would she do that? Today, we would call that identity theft or attempted identity theft. And how did Sandra know Judy? How did she know her birthday? Why did she choose a name that was very similar to Judy's name?
This whole thing is weird. Okay. I mean, so this lady, she's using her name, she's using the birthday. They do the handwriting analysis. I will tell you, I have had a case where I've had the FBI do handwriting analysis where I absolutely knew the two people were the same person. The person who committed the crime and the person who was the suspect were the same person. I could look at the handwriting myself and show you all the similarities. And the FBI was like, yeah, it's inconclusive. I'm like, what is the purpose of even having you people? I mean, seriously, like, I don't want to be too critical of handwriting analysis, but it is complete junk science. It is just worthless. It is better just to have a jury look at it and be like, what do you think, jury? Because they're just as likely to see it. And so that's why, you know, the Patsy Ramsey stuff, Alice mentioned that. The experts say it's not her. I don't think it's her. Other people look at it and say it's her. You can believe whatever you want to, because it's just a complete waste of time. And I think this is another example of that. But they have all these similarities, so much so that her parents, Judy Martin's parents, actually went to the police station to talk to this woman. And she was adamant it wasn't her. And she actually said at one point, Judy Martins is better off dead. I don't know what was going on with this lady. I don't know why she was doing the things she was doing. It's a strange aspect of this case. But it wasn't her. That's the one thing we can say for certain. Fast forward to 2000. And something happens that is just mind-blowing. And I can't believe it. We talked about before how we have some information on this case. And we have some reports and police reports and that sort of thing. Well, we don't have all the records. Because in 2000, Kent State University Police destroyed all records pertaining to Judy's disappearance. When the family found out they had done this, the excuse that was given was, quote, the files had been properly disposed of in accordance with the university's records retention policy. And this is an article in medium.com, which makes you wonder why. Number one, this is a good argument for university police not being the ones to investigate cases like this. But they asked Deputy Chief Peach why this was done, and he said it was never classified as a crime, and that was before the guidelines for missing persons were established, well before we were able to keep electronic versions of the records. So basically, they're like, well, you know, I mean, maybe she just walked off on her own. I mean, even in 2000, the lady hadn't been seen for 25 years, and the police are still like, well, you never know. I mean, maybe she just decided to go to Mexico and open a bar or something, so we're just going to destroy the record. So the record that they had, the original, is destroyed. To the extent we have copies of that, it's just because of reporters and sleuths who managed to get their hands on it before, the Avon Lake PD, who never destroyed their copy of the record because they're not idiots like the Kent State Police are. But this is just, I mean, absolutely insulting, to the extent, I think it was Peach who later said that now, you know, he regrets it every day that he did it. Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you signed off on this. And in fact, one of the original detectives signed off on it too. So what are you doing? And this is the kind of thing, it's impossible to believe that something like this would happen in 2000, but that's what they did. So good job, Kent State University Police.
And it really boggles my mind because the reason it was that it wasn't a crime. I can imagine that being a reason for like law enforcement but they are law enforcement for a university. What is a university charged with doing? I don't know. At the very least, keeping tabs of students, right? Like, you care about your graduation records. You know who doesn't graduate? Missing students. So you would think, like, in terms of what a police would care about for a university are not just classified crimes, but things like when you lose a student, you know, from your campus, from dorm to dorm. But that's just me. So yeah, this is shocking. And it's shocking that it's in 2000 and it was done without consulting like the family members. Like, do you want these instead? We don't have the space to carry all of these voluminous records. There weren't voluminous records, by the way, because there just wasn't a lot of information. So that's the whole timeline. That was 2000. She disappeared in 1978. We're now in 2024. It is truly shocking that this 100-yard walk has yielded so little information and so little has been happening in this case. Essentially, nothing has happened in this case, and you don't hear much about it either. So here are some other unusual aspects about the case that we haven't yet talked about. Judy's bike. So, like a lot of college students, Judy rode her bike everywhere. She even rode it late at night. And the bike, however, was apparently never found, or if it was, no one noted it. We've talked about kind of record-keeping problems here. So that would be a very important thing because obviously walking 100 yards is different in terms of your, I guess, the likelihood of someone being able to snatch you if you're on a bike, for example. It's a little harder to catch someone on a bike. Or
I have an update on this.
Oh, go ahead.
Dave O'Brien from the Chronicle Telegram says that the bike was accounted for. So I don't have any official documentation of that.
So we have a report.
He is a reporter. He has worked on this case a lot. He says the bike is accounted for. I think that's pretty good proof.
Okay, well, that tells us something too then. If her bike is around, that kind of cuts against the she ran away thing, right? You get a lot farther on a bike than you can on foot. And that she probably wasn't on her bike when she was taken either.
And I think that's important because if you think she, went back to the dorm and was like, I'm going to go out tonight, she wouldn't have ridden her bike the 100 yards from one dorm to another, but she might have ridden her bike into town or to a friend's place or something like that. So the fact that the bike wasn't, if the bike disappeared, that would be a big deal. But if the bike didn't disappear, I think that didn't happen because I think she would have ridden her bike and presumably whoever did whatever they did would have gotten rid of her, or the location where the bike was found would have been critical.
Yeah. So there's the bike issue. This is hopefully to stimulate like someone's memory of something that happened back in the day, because what happened to her bike in terms of like, did you know how she used her bike? Things like that. It would be really, really helpful. Okay. Another unusual aspect to discuss is Gary Haynes. We haven't talked about Gary just yet. So Gary Haynes was someone who lived in the area of the university, and he claimed that he knew Judy. So when you're going to say you know Judy, you're probably going to be investigated or interviewed, and that's exactly what happened. But when he was interviewed by police, Haynes said that while he did know Judy, he hadn't seen her in several weeks leading up to her disappearance. And he claimed that Judy partied and was into drugs. Haynes also himself had a criminal record for things like petty theft, marijuana possession. So not like violent crimes, but he did have a criminal record. And Jim Young, the ex-boyfriend, would say that Judy had smoked marijuana sometime in the past, but quit because it gave her headaches. So while it's not completely untrue that Judy, I guess she did like to party in the sense that she liked social events. We know that from her last day accounts, right? She enjoyed socializing with people. Does that equate to like partying and doing hard drugs? Hard to say, especially the person who probably knew her best in her habits in terms of partying was her ex-boyfriend, who said it was marijuana, which is a very different usage than say like cocaine or ecstasy.
Right. And I think this is actually a critical question, and I don't think it has been sufficiently answered. So Jim says she smoked marijuana, but she didn't like it because it gave her headaches. Her sister said did not use drugs. Might have smoked marijuana a couple times, but didn't use drugs. If she was into drugs, then that opens up more vistas of possibilities because, and we talk about sometimes the difference between victim blaming and victimology. We're not saying, well, if she used drugs and she deserved whatever happened to her. No, you're looking at the risk factors in the people that you're talking about. If she used drugs, then she automatically is open to running into unsavory aspects of society, right? Possibly drug dealers, people who might take advantage of her when she's on drugs. There are just so many more possibilities. Her being taken advantage of, her having an overdose, any number of things could have happened if she's into drugs. If she's not into drugs, then a lot of those doors close. And I think that's really important because, once again, we don't know what happened after she walked out of that dorm that day. Did she get picked up immediately? Did she go to another party? It's 2:30 in the morning. That's late for me. That's really late for me. When I was in college, that wasn't late. The number of times I went to bed at 4 or 4:30 or when the sun was coming up when I was in college were quite often. The number of times people left for parties at midnight happened all the time. So you could imagine she kind of went over to the other dorm. She bounced around a little bit. Maybe she really didn't find what she was looking for. And she goes to see her other friends, the friends who are a little bit shadier, the friends who are like Gary Haynes and are, into this scene, and maybe something went wrong. That is something that we just can't say. I think, if you're talking to her friends or if you're listening and you are a friend or you knew her, clarifying this point, I think would be really good for different avenues and possibilities of what might have happened to her that night.
Absolutely. Okay, this next unusual aspect, take with a grain of salt, because we've already told you before that polygraph tests are not lie detector tests. Polygraph tests measure biometric measures that may be an indicator of high stress, that may indicate someone's lying. So there's not like some special thing in your brain that says ding, 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 that was a lie. Rather, it's looking at your breathing, your heart rate, things like that typically go up when someone is nervous, and people tend to be nervous when they're telling a lie. You can fool polygraph tests, right? You can be a very calm person. You could be a psychopathic liar and nothing is going to shake you. Even if you are being asked in the face, did you murder Judy Martins? And you can say no, and nothing changes about your biometrics. You would pass the polygraph test. So take that with a grain of salt in terms of polygraph tests. They're great investigative tools because most people don't know that they're not admissible in court as evidence and that they don't actually tell you if someone is lying or not. But you can imagine if the police come to you and say, I want you to take a polygraph test. Your mind starts racing because you're thinking, what do they know? Why are they on my trail? They know something that I don't know. They know something more about what I'm not telling them. Then they start getting nervous, right? So we've already noted that a lot of people were polygraphed in this case. In fact, all the people from Kent who were friends, dorm mates, kind of noted around Judy that last night that she was cited, they're all polygraphed and they all passed. But the files do show that there was one failed polygraph, but the records don't say who it was. So of all of the polygraphs that were taken, kind of the notable people, the last person she was seen with, Charles, her ex-boyfriend, they all passed. But there is a noted failure in the records with no indication of who it was. Could mean something, could mean nothing.
And what's frustrating about this, and I don't know the answer to this question, but we don't know who it is because it's redacted. Is it in the original file? Probably. Does the original unredacted file still exist? Probably not. Unless this was an Avon Lake polygraph, it probably doesn't even exist anymore. So it's not even clear that we could ever know. Or if a cold case unit wants to look at this case, what's the first thing they're going to ask for? Hey, can we see the old file so we can go through it? I mean, cold case, it's not like in the movies where they're going out and they're turning over rocks and figuring out things. I mean, they do that. But the first thing they do is they look through the file. Remember the Delphi case? How'd they find Richard Allen? They just started from the beginning. They started looking through the file and they're like, oh shoot, there's this random dude who puts himself there wearing the right clothes, and they look into him and boom, he gets arrested, right? And that's the kind of thing that a cold case unit does. Can they do that in this case? I don't know. So we may never know exactly who it was who failed this polygraph, and whether that's important or not important, I can't say, but it would be nice if the cold case unit could maybe look more into that person. But whether that's possible, I can't say. Okay, so Jim Young. We talked about him before. Let's look at him a little bit deeper. We've talked about him in sort of general terms. It's the ex-boyfriend. He's an interesting character. Obviously, something happens to a woman The first thing you're going to look at, romantic interest, the men in her life. That's what you're going to look at. Sorry, guys, but it's a fact. And a lot of times, that's going to be the person who did it. He was Judy's ex-boyfriend. They had dated for 4 to 5 years. They actually broke up around New Year's Eve, which was roughly 5 months before Judy disappeared. The breakup was apparently mutual and was the result of spending a lot of time apart. It also had something to do with Jim's drinking problems. Now, they remained on amicable terms to the extent Jim actually talked to her on the phone the day she disappeared. And that is quite a coincidence to me. You know, Jim's one of the people who tells us everything was fine. She seemed like she was in good spirits. I mean, that's what he says. Can we know that for sure? Absolutely not. But that's what we have from him. But it is interesting to me that of all the days, you know, it's not like they had cell phones, right? It's not like, you know, they're just calling each other or shooting out a text. I mean, it was a little bit harder to call somebody back in the 70s than it is now. But they talked on that day. He did have a criminal history, as we said before. In March 1977, he was charged by Avon Lake PD for using a firearm while intoxicated. Police records say that he shot off his kneecap in a bar with a .357 Magnum. That's his own knee. That's a big gun. You don't want to shoot yourself in the knee with a .357. I mean, you don't want to shoot yourself in the knee with anything, but a .357 Magnum, I mean, that's rough, right? So he's not exactly careful when he's been drinking. He had gotten in trouble again shortly before Judy's disappearance for firing out of his window of an apartment with his .30-30 rifle, once again, while he was drunk. He was on house arrest at the time. He was on the verge of having his probation revoked. And according to police reports, there was a lot of emphasis that he had some issues, some psychiatric issues, and he really needed to get some help. Now, the police really honed in on him. They searched his vehicles. They searched his apartment. He consented to all that. Nothing was found. He consented to the polygraph. He passed. In the years that followed, he eventually would get into a pretty serious car accident, which has caused him a lot of health problems, this is my understanding, including memory loss and some mental issues. So really, honestly, at this point, what we know from Jim is probably all we'll ever know from Jim. He probably doesn't even remember all of these incidents now. Now, at least one of Judy's friends, Linda Gamble, would tell police that Jim told her Judy had a serious cocaine habit and was deeply in debt. And according to this story, Judy had been threatened if she didn't pay her debts. And this led Linda to believe that Jim knew more than he was telling. And Gamble said that Judy was using drugs. Now, once again, this is a statement that is consistent with one person who maybe kind of knew her. I'm not sure how close Linda and Jim were or how close Linda and Judy were. I don't know if Linda knows what she's talking about. I don't know if Jim said any of these things, but knowing the truth of these accusations is really important for this case, because now all of a sudden you have a possible suspect. You have somebody who would have a reason to be waiting on Judy in the middle of the night because she owes them some money, right? I mean, you can imagine all sorts of things, but we don't know the truth of these accusations. Once again, the family says that Judy was not on drugs, but it's the family. How much do they know? How much can you trust their account? This is a very murky area in this case. It's an area that, you know, when I had the opportunity to talk to Dave O'Brien, who's the reporter who's reported on this, whether he thought this was true, he does not think that Judy was involved in the drug scene at all. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you on this, but if the police are investigating, or if you're out there in Ohio or elsewhere and you decide to make this your case, this is something that I think would be worthwhile running down.
And a couple of things to note here, especially if Jim really did have a drug habit and if he were using that day. I think it is very interesting that they spoke that day. And you can still be on amicable terms and you can be happily broken up, but dating for 4 or 5 years is a real long history with someone. And remember where Judy was last that night, with someone that was probably in a romantic manner. So take that for what you will, but having been with someone for 4 to 5 years and then perhaps knowing that they are being romantic with someone else, even if you normally don't have a problem with it, there's going to be emotions there, especially if you're also in an altered state of mind. Secondarily, if you're dating someone for that long and that person is using substances, you don't have to necessarily be using them yourself, Judy in this instance, to be enmeshed in that world, to be around to maybe hold some of his illegal substances in your bag, or someone knows to come to you because you are very financially stable because you don't have a drug problem, to be like, hey, your deadbeat boyfriend owes me $20. So for people to tie you with debts or drug use, even if you yourself don't use it. So I have no indication that Judy uses, but I do note that if she's with someone that long who has been known to use it or have problems with substances, you can be pulled into that world without actually being a part of it. And especially if you're talking about people who are upset about debts, guess who they go after? Anyone close to you. It doesn't really matter if it's you or not. They do it for threats. They do it to get that $20. They do it to send a message.
And I think it's worth it just to go ahead and talk about Jim as a possible suspect in this case. The theory is that Jim did this. Now, there's a couple things going on here. Why is it so important that we know whether or not Judy used drugs? I mean, if she's back in the 70s, why are you dragging this girl through the mud? Why are you trying to sully her reputation when she's probably been dead for 50 years that she was on cocaine? That's not what we're trying to do. If you can prove that this isn't true, if you can prove two things. One, that Jim actually said this to Linda. Like, if you can confirm that Linda is 100% credible and when she said Jim said this, she is telling the truth. If you can confirm that, and if you can confirm number two, then it's a lie. Why would Jim say that if it's not true? Well, there's one really obvious reason. To throw suspicion on someone else. To say, wasn't me, it was probably the drug dealers that she owed a bunch of money to. That's probably who did it. Remember, Jim talked to her that day. Is it so hard to imagine that Jim, who's already on house arrest, and like I said, it's probably not being watched like a hawk by anybody, decided, and he had visited her earlier in the month, remember, and they had been intimate earlier in the month. Is it so hard to imagine that he would say, man, she's got nothing going on, I'm going to drive down and see her? And he drives down from Avon Lake. He gets to Kent State. He goes to her apartment. Maybe he waits for her for a little while. She never comes back. He starts to look for her. And what does he see? He sees her, leaving Charlie's room at 2:30 in the morning. Or maybe he sees them embrace. Or maybe he sees them kiss. And then Charlie watches her walk down the steps and into the night, turns around, goes back in his room. And what is Jim thinking? It's not hard to create a scenario where Jim would be someone with a real motive to do this. Now, do we have any evidence of that? No. Right now, we don't have any. The police looked into him. They looked into him pretty hard. They were not able to establish any connection between Jim and this murder. But once again, that's why it's really important that we know the truth of these drug allegations. Because I think that could lead us in a direction that right now we don't necessarily have any reason to go other than the fact that Jim is the ex-boyfriend. Which leads us to the current boyfriend. Or the boyfriend at the time. And the person we think maybe was a boyfriend or was a close friend or whatever was somebody who spent hours with her that night, including hours alone with her that night, and was the last person to see her alive, Charlie Nevels. Now, he was the last person to see her. He did pass a polygraph test. But the fact that he's the last person to see her, the avowed last person to see her, seems pretty significant. We've talked about this before. Anyone who was there that night, who was with her that night, could be a suspect. But who's the main suspect? The very last person with her. It has to be someone you look at. It has to be someone you can consider.
And here's the thing. We keep talking about this 5-minute walk, 100 yards. The only reason we think that walk happened is because of Charles saying it. We have no independent witness who can testify that Judy left Charles's dorm room. So the timeline and the distance really falls on one witness. Not saying he lied, but we are operating under a limited universe of knowledge. And the most important facts about what happened right before she was never heard from again does come from one person. And you have to really look into that witness, because if that's not true, she was supposed to be in his room for a couple hours. No longer are we talking about 5 minutes, but maybe a couple hours, which opens up a world of possibility. Remember the other friend, Charles's friend, who it's a little bit, there's a discrepancy in whether he came to Charles's room to drop off Judy's wig and sunglasses or glasses, or whether Judy went back to his dorm room to pick up her items. All we know are the items are gone, right? But that could say something, because why is there a discrepancy? Does the timeline suddenly change? Are we no longer talking about her ever having been seen leaving the dorm room? Then do we have a Brian Schaefer situation? Is she still in that dorm, which is not her own dorm? So it's not that we have anything to point to with Charles, except that the timeline we're operating on is based solely on his testimony.
And look, this is what's unfair about true crime. And it's what can get really pernicious about true crime. It's 50 years ago. These people have lived a life in the last 50 years. And to our knowledge, none of these people have ever done anything that would even make you suspect that they were at all involved in Judy's case. But when you look at the case, you have to look at these things with sort of cold eyes. You know, he was the last person to see her. If we're right, which I think we are, that she never made it back to her dorm. Her glasses are there. The wig is not there. The clothes are not there. So either she made it back to her room and then left again, still wearing her hard contacts, which I never wore those, but my dad did, and he would tell nightmare stories about it. How
they're not comfortable. They're not comfortable.
Either she left everything in that dorm room, including her bike, and then walked somewhere and was killed, or went off to start a new life. She never made it back. And if she never made it back, then either this incredibly remarkable murder, which absolutely happened, where she was a victim of just the worst kind of wrong place, wrong time, murders either by a serial killer or someone who just in that 100 yards in that 5 minutes struck and killed her, or someone else in that dorm did it. And with Charles saying that he saw her leave, it means that either that remarkable thing happened, or we need to take a really hard look at Charles. Now, I think the police probably did take a really hard look at Charles, and we are certainly not saying that he's involved in any way. We're not saying that Jim's involved in any way. It's just, if you want to be serious about this case, you want to think seriously about it, unfortunately, these are the kind of questions I think you have to ask. That brings us to the end of sort of our overall discussion of the case. I think now we can talk about theories. I mean, we've been talking about theories, right? And we're going to talk about one. I've been talking for a while, but don't worry. This isn't going to be short. The first one, Ted Bundy killed Judy. This is actually one of those popular theories like out there in the world, like as the 70s and Ted Bundy was around. It's kind of like, you know, if the man had been alive at the time, it would have been, what's his name? Somebody help me.
Lisk? What?
Israel Keys.
Oh, Israel Keys.
If Israel Keys had been alive at the time, people would say it's probably Israel Keys. You know, he was in Ohio within 6 months of this date.
It's like
so
lore has made them more prolific than they really were. Look, it's horrific how prolific they were, but lore does make them a little more prolific than they probably were.
And who killed people on college campuses? Ted Bundy. This is a college campus. So therefore, it's probably Ted Bundy. And you actually see this around sometimes. The thing about it, Ted Bundy, not going to defend Ted Bundy often, but I'll defend him here. Because he was in prison at the time. So he probably didn't do it. I'm going to say he probably did not sneak out of prison. He was good at breaking out of prison, but he probably didn't sneak out of prison in Florida, where he would eventually be executed, travel up to Ohio, murder Judy, and then go back to prison. He probably didn't do that. So I think we can definitively say that neither Israel Keys nor Ted Bundy was responsible for this crime.
I think that's right. So then let's talk about some other theories. We're always going to start with this because I think we all wish that this were the case, but unfortunately, I don't know that this is the case. The theory is that Judy left on her own. So there's no indication that Judy left voluntarily, as we know that the items she would have taken with her, like her ID, her personal belongings, her contacts, those sorts of things were all found in her dorm room, left kind of in the way
her glasses were found in her dorm room.
Glasses, sorry. She had her contacts, which I have worn contacts for much of my life. You have to take them out. Like, it doesn't matter what kind. Soft, disposable, hard, especially hard contacts. They really do start hurting after a while. You have to take them out to clean them, to let your eyes breathe, or you will get infected, and contacts are supposed to be disposed of at some regularity, even if you have non-disposable ones. You don't wear them forever, like glasses. Glasses, you can wear them as long as the prescription is correct. And that's because bacteria grows on contacts if you don't take them out of your eyes, you can get very serious bacterial infections. So that's why contacts glasses matter. So if you're a contact wearer, you bring your glasses because at some point you have to take out your contacts. And when you do that, you can't see very well. So then you have your glasses. So her room essentially looked like what you would imagine if you were going out for the night and you plan to come back that night. It's just there, right? Like you don't need to put it up because you'll be home very soon. Now, there were some rumors that Judy was working as a sex worker in Cleveland. Guys, I hope I never disappear because I'm afraid that no matter what an upstanding life I live, no matter what, there's going to be theories that I abandoned my family and friends to go live on an island, that I'm a sex worker. Doesn't matter. Like I could be a nun and someone will say she's a woman, probably a sex worker. And someone will say that.
Don't forget you're on drugs.
I was just about to say, and someone is going to be like, sure, she really did not like even roller coasters, but she was a lover of the drugs. I mean, like, doesn't matter who you are. These things will all come up. And I mention that because we don't have any proof that Judy was a sex worker. The only thing ever mentioned was that night she was goofing off because she had this personality that liked to make people laugh, and she had on a trench coat and glasses and a wig on, kind of looking like a sex worker might look. Doesn't mean she was a sex worker, and no indication that she actually did that for money. But there were rumors that she was working as a sex worker after she disappeared. And again, I think it's just because anytime a woman disappears, you wonder if she was a sex worker, trafficked, in drugs, and like kidnapped or killed by the cartel. These are good theories because those are really terrible things that can happen to women. Those are vulnerabilities of women. Women are trafficked. Women can be drugged, but we have absolutely no evidence of that. And I think the fact that everything was left behind, that she never had any more contact, that she never spent money that we can trace anywhere, I don't think she left by herself. She certainly would have had to have real help from someone that we have no idea who they are. You would think they'd also be with them rather than left behind to take a polygraph test and pass.
999,999 times out of a million, they didn't leave on their own, which is why it's amazing to me that the police would use this as a reason to destroy the file. Like, I'm not saying it never happens. There are extraordinary cases where it does. Extraordinary cases. But the average case where somebody who's a normal college student dressing up in a wig and having jokes with her friends with plans to go on a trip over Memorial Day, then just decides, I'm going to just take my wig and my pants and shirt and that, start a new life. Not even going to get my glasses. I'm going to do that. Or my money. I'm just going to go. That's not what happened. It's not what happened. And the only reason we talk about it every time is because so many people believe this, including apparently the police. And it just, I don't know.
Let me just walk through the administrative headache of what happens if you leave your glasses behind. Let's say you do want to start a new life. Leave your glasses behind, no time. I can't walk the 100 yards to get my glasses. Glasses are prescription. They're fitted to your face. They're expensive. Before you can get prescription glasses, you have to go to the eye doctor, which costs money. And certainly so if you don't have insurance or any identification that you have insurance, then you get the whole eye test. They write you a prescription. Then you have to go get glasses, which usually have to be made for your prescription. So you can't pick them up same day. Nowadays, we can probably go to a big box store and get one made within an hour or something. But usually it takes a couple days to get the right lenses in. And frames, nowadays, you can buy online frames that could be as cheap as maybe $20, but glasses are not inexpensive. I remember as a kid, it was these are your glasses. If you lose them, this is the most precious thing that you own as a child. $100 or more, right? Not cheap to have these. And so if you're on the run, first of all, you can't see to run. You got to find a doctor and money to pay for the doctor. And you have to wait for your prescription. So if I'm on a run, I'm going to grab my glasses because I don't want the administrative headache of having to find a doctor and then prescription glasses. I don't know how bad her eyes were, but needing glasses at all, I had pretty bad eyes. I couldn't see anything. I can't read a book in front of me. I can't drive without glasses. It really hinders my ability to function in the world. And so without glasses, I feel naked, essentially. So if I was going to take one thing between a credit card and glasses, I might actually take the glasses.
Yeah, exactly. That to me, that's proof positive she didn't run away.
Okay, so then we've talked a little bit about people saying, well, maybe she was on drugs or she used drugs or she was part of the drug world. So if that is true, then we have to talk about the theory that maybe she overdosed. So, of course, the precondition is you have to believe that Judy was on drugs and then that she somehow overdosed. But if so, where's her body? Because if she overdosed, she didn't move herself somewhere. And as Dave O'Brien noted, if she did overdose, the most likely thing is that someone would dump her body either, like they didn't want to get in trouble. Let's just say that she was hanging out with guys and they were all taking turns doing some drug that she was not familiar with and it was laced with something and she overdosed. They probably would freak out. You don't want a dead body in your dorm room. So what do? Drop them off at the woods. They search the woods, remember? The hospital, a police station, the sidewalk, somewhere not in your room. And it's hard to move an unconscious body. Doesn't matter how light you are. She's not that tall, but it doesn't matter. It's hard to move a body, especially with no one being able to see you. So you're not going to go very far to dump a body. You're just going to dump it somewhere and get out of there. She's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't think most people, if this were an OD, would have buried the body, for instance. I think they would have tried to get rid of the body quickly. There was a case maybe a couple years ago now, it was in Baton Rouge. The businessman disappears in Baton Rouge, and there's all this sort of theories about what happened. And it turned out he went to Baton Rouge. He was away from his family. He went down. He bought some drugs. It turned out probably that the drugs had fentanyl in them. He took them. He OD'd. He died. The drug dealer realized what happened and basically rolled him up in a carpet and dumped him underneath a bridge, which of course they found the body because you're going to find it eventually, and they were able to trace it back to him. And that's about as elaborate as you're going to get, usually on one of these OD cases. This is always a popular theory. Oh, they OD'd and then they had to get rid of the body. You see this in Maura Murray. You see this in Breonna Maitland. You see this in all sorts of cases. But the reality is, if you had an OD, most likely you would find the body. Though it would be nice, once again, to know whether or not this is even really a possibility. Did she use drugs or did she not? So, talking a little bit about the body, if she was murdered, they had to do something with it, whether it was an OD or an actual murder. And one theory is that she was dumped in this sort of protected watershed called Towners near Kent State. So it's a sort of a wilderness area. It was opened as a park at the time, though it was relatively new. Even today, it's very thick, it's very wooded, it's overgrown, it's hard to navigate. It's the kind of place that if you dumped a body, it would be hard to find, assuming you could get in there and do the dumping. This was one of the areas that was searched. This was one of the areas that the National Guard did the flyover with the infrared to do the search. But as I said earlier, there's a real question about how thorough that was and how effective it would have been. And there are a lot of people who believe to this day that if Judy was killed, and unfortunately, I think the most likely outcome here is that she did die that night, that her body may have ended up in this wilderness area and may be there to this day. Now, the counterpoint to that is there are people who go into this, hikers, hunters, just people out for a stroll. They haven't come upon her, and I get that. That is a good argument, but nevertheless, we've talked about this before, how bodies are found where hunters basically have to walk right over them. You guys, you may remember the Lyric and Elizabeth, the two girls who were murdered that we talked about when we talked about the Delphi murders. They were found in an area like this, but it was a situation where the hunters literally walked right into where their bodies were. That was lucky. If that hadn't happened, maybe we wouldn't have found them. But possibility she's there, probably would have been found, but I don't think you can rule it out. So that brings us to everyone's favorite theory, a serial killer. And in this case, we have a serial killer that we can talk about, William John Posey Jr. Now, some people have speculated that convicted murderer William John Posey Jr. was responsible for Judy's disappearance. He was convicted of the abduction and murder of a woman in Illinois, to which he pleaded guilty. He was also convicted, of abducting a woman in Vermont. Before his death in 2020, he admitted to killing her and her body was never found. Now, both those people were people he knew, so that'd be a little different than here. But, hey, he's a serial killer, so you could imagine his MO changing. And he's one of those people who we know a couple people he's responsible for, but most people think he's probably killed more people than that. In February 1980, Kent State detectives confirmed that they were looking into the possibility that Posey was involved in Judy's disappearance after discovering that he lived in Kent from either May or June 1978 to September 1979. I have read different things on this. Some people say that he was definitely there in May, which obviously puts him there when she disappeared. Other people say it was more like June. Now, it was the end of May when she disappeared, so it may not matter. It's close. It's close enough that he deserves a serious look. And even if he wasn't there in May, he had lived in Columbus, Ohio before, so he wasn't that far away. Police could never connect him directly to this case. There was never any evidence linking him to Judy Martins. He has denied having anything to do with it. As we said, he died in prison in 2020. He's actually in federal prison. And if he was involved, it probably went with him. It's one of those things where we'll probably never know. I think most likely he is not responsible. Usually it's not the serial killer, though it is interesting that he was so close to where Judy disappeared at the time. And that brings us sort of to the end of our story and that ultimate question, whether this is a case that can be solved. Look, the investigation into Judy's disappearance, it's hard to say how thorough it was or not. It is very irritating that the file was destroyed. You have to wonder about Kent State's position on this, how much they were concerned about avoiding a PR disaster, given what had happened there only a few years earlier. There is zero evidence, none, that we have that tells us what happened to Judy or even indicates what happened to Judy. Without a body or some evidence of her whereabouts, it's going to be difficult to solve this case. But this is one of those things where we've talked about it 1,000 times. This case is old and it's getting older, but it's not so old that it can't be solved. And it's not so old that there isn't someone out there who has information that can lead to the truth about what happened to Judy. I'm going to give you the description of her. The United States Marshals are now looking into this case. The Ohio Attorney General is looking into it. Let me give you what they say. Judy has hazel eyes and black hair. And at the time of her disappearance, she was 5 feet, 4 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. Judy was last seen wearing denim gaucho-style pants, a yellow and brown blouse, brown boots, and a light-colored trench coat. She was wearing a curly red wig and carrying a large white purse. If you have any information about Judy, please contact the Ohio Attorney General's office at 330-672-3070 or the United States Marshals tip line at 866-492-6833.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to theorize because we've talked about all our theories and there are just massive holes in this case. Right now, I think it's really unknowable what happened. For the sake of closure, I really hope her body is found at some point because unfortunately, I think she did not live past that night. Whatever happened to her, I think it ended there. I don't think she ran away. I think she was met with something terrible, whether an accident seems unlikely because if it were an accident, I think we'd find her body. Like if she were hit by a car, for example. I think she met with something terrible. And sometimes all it takes is 1 minute. 5 minutes can be long enough for something terrible to happen. So if there is anyone out there who knows any of the people we've talked about, who knew about her bike habits, who may have known people in the area, maybe there's rumors in the area, the window of time in which witnesses still may remember things is closing, but it's not hopeless. So I hope by covering this case, we've brought some awareness to her case, especially because, like the Kent State Police have destroyed her files, so they're definitely not looking into it. I think that is the least we can do for Judy, who, by all accounts, all jokes aside, truly seemed like a wonderful, full of life person whose life was snuffed out much too early.
I do want to give a special thanks to Aislinn, who we talked about last episode. She brought this case up to us. It is not a case I had ever heard of. It's been covered by a few other people. We mentioned True Crime Garage, Missing, but I had not heard those episodes, so I didn't know about this case. So thank you to her, and let her be a lesson to all of you out there. We actually do read your emails when you recommend cases. And it might be months or years before we get back to you. But a lot of times we will follow up. And then Dave O'Brien from the Chronicle Telegram for all the good work he has done on this case and continues to do. Thank you to both of them for talking us through this case. I hope that our coverage of it was more in depth and more detailed and more accurate because of them. Alice, do you want to answer a question?
Absolutely.
I got a good one. So.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to answer one question today. Remember, if you leave a 5-star review and leave a question, or email us and say, hey, I left a 5-star review, here's my question, we will eventually answer that question. So this one is from Farm Ultra Booster. They want to know, what is your favorite foreign place to visit?
Foreign place?
Foreign place. So somewhere not in the United States, though I'm going to go ahead and say, if you have a favorite place in the United States and that's your favorite place, feel free to say that.
I know you love to travel, so you can go first.
So my favorite is easy. Japan. I love Japan.
Oh.
I love it. It's an amazing country. It's one of those places, it's super safe, which is great. It has just this amazing culture, amazing history, wonderful food, nice people, and it is so foreign. You know, like you go to a place like Canada or Great Britain, both of which I love. You know, everybody speaks English. It's kind of like, you know, going to New York or something, right? Japan is completely foreign. It's completely different, but it is just an incredible place. I've always loved Japan. It's been a while since I've been there. I would love to go back. It's probably, I mean, without question, of the places, you know, there are places that I've gone that have been higher on my bucket list, but I did not necessarily enjoy them in the same way, and I would not necessarily want to go back. You know, seeing the pyramids was amazing. Going to Egypt was pretty awful. So, but Japan is incredible. So that would be my number one.
That's funny that you said going to Egypt was terrible, because I was going to say, I do. I love to travel. It's been a while since I've really gotten to be like just, you know, a wanderlust kind of person because of, you know, careers and podcasts that we have to do. But in my younger days, I just loved to do the things that you could only do where you were. So when I went to Egypt, I went camping in the desert, and it was like incredible. Like foxes came out at night. We went surfing down sand dunes, and it was just, it felt like you were the only person in the world. You know, getting to swim in the Continental Divide in Iceland, hiking glaciers, you know, watching a glacier flip over in the middle of the ocean, going to places where you feel the like beauty of the world. And like, we obviously talk about really sad, dark moments in humanity all the time, but there's this like beauty and wonder of seeing just how big the world is. Obviously, I love going all over Asia. I love Asian food. You know, if you've ever been to like the Taiwan night markets for food, I mean, like, don't eat during the day, just fast all day and eat all night. I mean, that is so much fun. Get tailor-made suits in China. They like some of the best tailors I've ever had in my life are from there. You can only get them when you actually go visit. It's not the same when you buy it from like Amazon and it's made in China. This is like literally made for you when you're there. And, you know, getting to hike the mountains and like shear sheep in New Zealand. Like, there's just something about being able to be enmeshed in a different world and to remember that all your problems and all your view of the world may actually be really limited, which I think helps, I don't know, like personal growth. And I look forward to doing that again one day. But if you are able to I would much prefer to travel than get anything in life. Mm-hmm. Like, yep. There's no present or physical thing I want. I would trade a nice car, maybe not my minivan, but I would trade just about anything that's like tangible, physical for a trip. And it could be alone. I have no problems traveling alone except for maybe being murdered. But so far I haven't been murdered, so I feel great about it. So I love all the things the world has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I love more than travel are my kids, which prevent me from traveling. So, but I'm with you. It's funny. You mentioned all these, like, you know, beautiful, like out in the middle of nowhere. I love cities. Like, I love, like, Tokyo is, yeah. I love standing in the middle of Tokyo in like Shibuya and where
How
there are just
interesting.
so many people. I
didn't think about that until you said that, but it's not that I hate cities, but if I were to go to obviously when you travel somewhere, you fly to a city. I spend very little time compared to my full time in the city because I want to be in the middle of nowhere, But it's because you grew up in the middle of nowhere and I grew up in a city. So maybe that's what it is.
And that could be it. I mean, it's kind of wild like that, right? I mean, because I just, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, but I love New York. I love New York so much. I mean, New York, just going to New York.
And I really don't.
I love it. But
I've lived like in the middle of the city, right? Like I lived in a crack house. Have I told that story? That'll be another Q&A. When I lived in an actual crack house in New York, Bushwick,
Chicago, Los Angeles. I love Los Angeles. Boston. I mean, I love them. Shanghai. I mean, it's hard to beat Shanghai.
Shanghai is
cities.
Incredible. But that's so funny. I never thought about that. But now, like, you've kind of opened my mind of like the kind of places I'll want to make sure to visit. And the other thing, like, I would love to do, and this is why I would not trade my Odyssey, because my Odyssey is part of my plan of travel. And you're going to be part of this, Brett. As soon as our kids are old enough, we're going to go to all the national parks in the United States in the Odyssey. I cannot wait. That is my dream. I hope to do that like every summer with my kids when they get older. Right now, they're like heathens in the car. So not now, but like we were talking about the Grand Canyon tonight with my kids. And I was like, they were like, can we go one day? And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to drive to the Grand Canyon, watch the sunrise, go camping and go hiking there in my Odyssey. So there are places like it could be anywhere, right? It doesn't have to just be foreign.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do it. We'll do it, Alice. We'll go on that trip with you. Can't wait.
Please do. We'll stop at places you want to go to. Like, I
love the national parks. I love driving. I don't know. I would be fine getting in a car and driving and just like stopping in little places, big places, whatever places, just seeing the way people live their lives. I mean, like you mentioned, just hanging out, I'm with you. If, when my kids, when my wife divorces me and my kids go away to college, I'm just going to be an itinerant traveler. I'm just going to jump on trains and ride them around the country or something. Anyway. Okay, guys. Well, let us know what you thought about this story. Let us know what your favorite place is to go to. Do you like cities? Do you like to be in the middle of nowhere? Do you have a particular country that you love, or do you like to stick it out where you're from? We can't wait to hear from you. Shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on the TikTok. We're on the Facebook. Go to the gallery. See us on the gallery. If you love the podcast, the gallery is a great place to go. If you hate the podcast, we have a subreddit where you can go talk about how much you hate the podcast. There's something for everyone. So we hope that you will take advantage of that. If you want to get these episodes early and ad-free, if you want to watch us do this and see all the crazy things we do in the middle because we don't know what we're doing, join Patreon for as little as $3 a month, and you will have all your episodes early and ad-free, and you can join them for live recordings. Thank you again to all of you for your support. Let us know the cases you want to hear. Shoot us an email. That's the best way to do it. That's how Aislinn did it. And here we are talking about Judy Martins today. Well, Alice, is there anything else you want to add before we sign off for now?
No, but keep bringing these cases top of mind that could really use the attention. Look, we talked about Aisha Degree for like 4 years. Something's happening in that case. So maybe the more ears we can get into, the more people we get to cover these types of cases, maybe there can be a break and there can be finally some resolution both for the victims and their loved ones.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with a new case. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
Literally going live. Okay. But you know what makes it way better, A Tough Day?
What?
That channel that I talked about, 80s rock ballads, man. Always makes you feel better. All right. Oh, da, 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 da. Excuse me.
All right. You ready to do this?
Yeah. Wait. Sorry. Let me scroll to the right part.
You highlighted it. It was so smart.
Well, because I have a really bad memory.
I was thinking, man, we got to figure out where we stopped. And then I looked at the outline, and it was highlighted.
So just about a week later, at 5:30 that evening, a man named Andrew Fabini reported seeing a woman matching Judy's description in Ravenna, Ohio, walking down Prospect Street towards I actually don't ever know how to say this name.
Sunoco.
Sunoco, is that right?
Yeah, you know why I know that?
Why?
Because in NASCAR, Sunoco is the sponsor, and so all the gasoline is Sunoco racing fuel.
Okay, I see it all the time. I just don't think I've ever said it, and I guess I don't watch enough NASCAR.